So in ISKCON, in the Hare Krishna movement, how do we see things? It's interesting because in Bhagavad Gita, you have hierarchy, but you also have equality. Krishna introduces Chaturvarnyam, the Varnashram system, which is a hierarchy, but then again he emphasizes that we're all equal. So the hierarchy refers to our bodies. Our bodies have a certain hierarchy based on, like, for example, parents and children, or the Brahmins and so on, or guru and disciple. But spiritually, we're all equal. Spiritually, we're all equal. So in a spiritual society, if the emphasis is on hierarchy, that means that society is mostly in the bodily concept of life. I'm not saying that we abolish the hierarchies. I'm not saying that children shouldn't, obey their parents, or that disciples shouldn't follow the guru. I'm not saying that we should abolish the hierarchy, but someone who's in a higher position in a hierarchy is qualified to be in that higher position only if that person sees the equality. In other words, a guru who takes the position of a superior is truly qualified to be in that higher position only if the guru sees that ultimately we're all equal. A guru who thinks I'm really better than my disciple needs help. Or a sannyasi. As we know, sannyasis are, without question, the most humble members of our society. There's absolutely no question about that. But let's say, for example, if I am a sannyasi, despite some criticism. So, as a sannyasi, I'm qualified to take the free lunch or the honor of being a sannyasi really only if I understand that I'm not actually better than other people. Because we're all spirit soul, we're all equal. And that fact is the most important fact. And so ironically, it's precisely the people who best understand that I'm not better than you that are qualified to take a higher position in a hierarchy. And people who exploit an external position, such as sannyasi or brahmana, people who exploit that position to really think they're better than other people are actually unqualified. So what happens in a spiritual society, which hopefully doesn't just degenerate into merely a religious society, what happens in a spiritual society is the extent to which the people on top, the people in the higher position, really understand, deeply understand that they're not better than anyone else, that we're all equal. To that extent, it will actually be a spiritual society. And the extent to which people in high positions really, they may talk the talk, but in terms of what they really feel inside, they actually feel superior. The extent to which people in higher positions actually think they're better than other people, to that extent, it's not a spiritual society, it's more of a mundane religious society. And don't just take my word for it. I'll quote the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam says, and this is a very heavy verse, Archayam eva haraye pujang jaksha dhaye hate natad bhakteshu chanyeshu sabhakta prakrita smrita. I rest my case. That a person who endeavors to worship the Lord, but archayam eva, only in the deity form. Sunday warrior. You just come on, you see the deities, and that's God. But that person does not worship the deity, same deity, does not worship the deity in the hearts of the devotees, and does not worship the deity in all living beings. In other words, you don't see that every person or every body is a mandir, is a temple. So every time you meet another person, you are actually in the temple. And so if someone doesn't see that, or doesn't act that way, but only respects the deity in the temple, the Bhagavatam says, Sabhakta, that devotee, Sabhakta, Prakrita Smrita, is understood to be on the material platform. In other words, it's not just because I joined the Hare Krishna movement that I'm on the spiritual platform. Or not even if I wear certain kinds of dress. That doesn't mean I'm on the spiritual platform. Because the Bhagavatam says you can actually worship the deity with faith. Archayameva haraye pujam jak shraddhayayate. Someone can actually worship the deity faithfully. And yet, if they do not see and respect the deity in all other people, then that's the material platform. So, now that it's ISKCON 50 and there are endless self-congratulatory programs going on, I don't know, it might not be appropriate to have even a tiny bit of self-analysis or introspection. Maybe that's inappropriate. But if somehow or other we do think that at this 50-year anniversary, it might be nice to have just a little bit of self-investigation, then we should ask ourselves that question. If you look at the way ISKCON functions, the way it operates, the way the leaders are, does it feel like we are led by people who deeply understand that we are all equal? Who offer genuine respect and honor to everyone, who do not feel they are in a higher position. I mean, they may actually be in a higher position administratively or even as a guru. That's fine. I'm not trying to destroy hierarchies. But do the people in higher positions understand more than the people in the lower positions that we're all equal? And do they offer that genuine respect? For example, equality, one of the most important ways that we express equality in civilized societies is by giving everyone justice. Throughout history, whether it's Bhagavad Gita, by the way, the Sanskrit word for justice is dharma. And Krishna says that he comes to this world when justice is declining. And he reestablishes it. And Krishna also makes clear that justice is based on equality. It's all in the Bhagavad Gita. You know, read it and weep. So do we live in a society in which those in higher positions have a deep, profound, heartfelt commitment to justice for everyone? I'll leave it to everyone to, come up with your own answer. But I suggest that now in the 50-year anniversary of ISKCON, it might actually be interesting to think about things like this. Maybe sort of in the intermissions between our self-glorification. So, as we know, Daksha is actually a son of Brahma, isn't he? So he really came over on the Mayflower. I mean, in the sense that, he's one of the original living beings of the universe. He's a very exalted personality, and yet his specific mistake here, he literally lost his head in this incident. And his specific mistake here is forgetting the honor and respect that is due to other living beings, no matter what kind of body they have. And even if they are not in a high administrative position. So that's the kind of spiritual society, frankly, which will attract the world. Especially, I might say, the Western world, where people are so concerned with justice and equality. And if we start to... Anyway, thank you very much for your attention. Any questions on these points? For those of you who feared that you might take breakfast at lunchtime today. We're actually going to wind up. Yes?
I like your point about the 50th stage of our movement, being introspective about who we are, where we stand. Specifically, you're talking about the leadership and then getting on or off the track. So how do we, or was there an example in secular society of how to structure in such a way that leadership has certain standards to follow that reflect what you were just talking about?
Yes.
And if it doesn't come to that point, how to deal with that? In other words, if leaders have in their own mind, this is the way it should be because I'm the leader. It's kind of
Right. Oh, like an herbal tea party. We can't do caffeine tea parties.
Yeah. So we have a fractured society that different leaders have different ways of doing things, and there's no standard.
I think the important thing, if you study the world, what you find is the higher the level of general education in a society, the more justice there is. Because we are conditioned souls. Welcome to the Mahatattva. We are conditioned souls. And if I know that I'm dealing with a person that doesn't know their rights or doesn't think they have any rights, it is very seductive. I will be seduced into abusing that person. Because power corrupts. And knowledge is, for example, I don't know Chanakya Pandit or Hitopadesh, but there's that Sanskrit proverb that Buddhir jasya balam tasya. One who has intelligence has power. And so you find around the world, like for example, take Scandinavia, where everybody has education and they have the most honest governments in the world, the least corruption. And then there's a direct correlation between, let's say, countries where they have very bad public education and a lot of corruption. And the better the general education, the less the corruption. That's a direct correspondence. And so if devotees are not aware that their leaders must give them justice, must treat them fairly, must treat them respectfully, if they're not aware of that, then they may just think that it's Krishna conscious to be mistreated, or it's Krishna conscious to be denied justice, that somehow, or to be treated unfairly, that this is somehow an act of devotion. And in a sense it is, humility is always a good thing. However, we have to say, is it good for Prabhupada's movement? Actually, I'm just going to put this out. Things like this. Krishna was. So, and I think at this point, the world is not going to be attracted to a society that does not effectively and systematically guarantee justice to its members. Guarantee that all the members of this spiritual society will be treated fairly. And if you're not treated fairly, you have recourse. There are things you can do to secure justice. You will not be mistreated. Frankly, I think that's a lot more attractive than just elaborate rituals and big buildings. I think that that's what people are looking for. People are looking for a movement where the relationships seem spiritual. They actually look spiritual. They are spiritual. So I think the most important thing here is, I just wrote a paper, by the way. Yeah. And I point out that Prabhupada is very concerned about these things. If I can just go very quickly into the sociology of religion, this is mainstream, standard sociology of religion. This is not, as I say, coming from a wacko website. In the initial stage of religious movement, whether it's ISKCON or any other religious movement, you have a charismatic leader, like Prabhupada. Charisma in Greek means Shakti-avesh. It means a divine empowerment, a divine gift. So Prabhupada is a charismatic leader in the social science sense because he has, or his followers understand that he has or accept that he has this divine empowerment. And so when Prabhupada was personally here, all authority was in Prabhupada. We understood Shastra through Prabhupada. He said, go, stay, yes, no, that was it. It's not that you told Prabhupada, I have my rights, Prabhupada. You can't do that. And so when the charismatic leader passes away, you enter into another historical stage. And what history shows is that the ability of a new spiritual religious movement to survive, to flourish as a spiritual movement depends on their ability to take that charismatic authority that, for example, in our case, Prabhupada had, and channel it and transform it into a rational, sustainable, institutional structure where there's justice. So that the leaders of the movement, gurus, GBC, whoever they may be, they're not above the law, they follow the law. And so to think that as a leader, as a big leader, I don't have to follow the rules, that is imitating Prabhupada. That's not following Prabhupada, that's imitating Prabhupada. That's imitating Prabhupada. In fact, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3, even if you are self-realized, follow the rules. He says it's right there in the Gita, because if you don't follow the rules, you're going to mislead everybody else. And it's not that just by becoming a top manager that you are self-realized. It's not that the fact that someone has a high managerial position automatically means that person is self-realized. Every religion in history shows that some people achieve high managerial positions who are not so spiritually advanced, or the highest managerial positions. So the mere fact that someone is a member of a governing body, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not an anarchist. I'm not saying don't follow the law. Everyone just, go out in the street, and burn down, burn Sankirtan bands or something. It's not, we're not talking about anarchy here. We're talking about, devotees that follow the law. But the point is, everyone has to follow the law, and the law has to be fair. And it's not that because someone has the highest managerial position, that person is automatically spiritually advanced. They're not the same thing. In every religion in the world, some people who follow the basic principles of their religion and are good managers become top leaders in that church or that religious movement. So therefore, seeing that the top managers are necessarily the most advanced or most Krishna conscious it's just not true. They may be. Some of our top managers may be, in fact, some of them are. Some of them are very advanced, and some of them may not be. And that's why you have to have laws. You can't just say that whoever the top managers are, they are so spiritually advanced that they don't need to follow the rules. That doesn't work. And it's not working. So what we need in ISKCON is the rule of law, not the rule of whim, the whims of individuals, but the rule of law. So when you join ISKCON, you have certain duties, you have certain rights. These are the rules of the game. They don't, as I say, move the goal line in the middle of the game. And that's the kind of society, I think, that civilized, educated human beings want to belong to. Yes?
Just to follow, so it appears that throughout the world this problem exists, because you say sociologists analyze it, so is the world just doomed to this kind of chaotic religious...
No! Yeah.
Is there an opportunity for a religious group like ISKCON
yes.
to create the standard that Paternity Sreća, to set a nice standard that will become...
Yes. So the more devotees in general are educated, it's simply a fact of life. If you like it, you don't like it, it's just the way the world is. That in a society, the more people in general are educated and know things, the more justice there is, the more honest the government is, and the more the people in general are ignorant, the worse the government tends to be. It's just the way it is. And therefore, I have been taking steps in my service to Prabhupada to try to educate devotees about certain facts, not to foment, revolution, sedition, anarchy, chaos, just power to the people. But the idea is we want a fair, rational, civilized society where everyone follows the rules and the rules are fair. Yeah. So therefore, education. That's why I'm trying to, as far as I understand these things, I'm trying to teach the devotees. Yes, Vedasara Prabhuji.
Just a little bit more clarification on this one, Raj. When we talk about justice, I mean the way you explained it, and the way our philosophy teaches us to imbibe its teachings, and the way it's presented to the members in our society, is that this world is an unfair world. And so...
That's not what Krishna teaches.
So that's why we need to surrender to Krishna. Because
No. Yeah, that's a very convenient teaching for someone who's on top. The fact is, Krishna himself says in the Bhagavad Gita, Jejata mam prapadyante, tang sataya, as people approach me or deal with me, I precisely reciprocate. That's the essence of justice. That's the essence of justice. It's just like, the most famous symbol of justice, and Krishna says he comes to this world to restore justice to this world. The most famous symbol of justice in the world is the goddess of justice, blindfolded and holding the scales. And it's very interesting because you see this in front of courthouses. Normally, in Europe they have this also. Yeah, so normally, because it's just, things have to balance. The punishment has to fit the crime. The reward has to fit the act. And interestingly, justice generally carries a sword, but the sword is carried below the scales, because first you have to fairly measure everything, and then you apply justice. So Krishna says he comes to this world to restore justice. And so if we're representing Krishna, treating people fairly, treating people equally. Krishna says you cannot achieve the highest devotion unless you treat everyone fairly. So this preaching that never mind the world's hopelessly corrupt, maybe it is, but does that mean ISKCON should be corrupt? So humility, yes, but for example, myself, I'm not doing what I'm doing because I want something. I've already had all the positions in ISKCON and this and that. I can honestly say at this point, just give me some nice organic fruit and a quiet place, and I want to write some books. So I don't personally want any position in ISKCON. I'm not looking for followers, unless they're very rich. But come on, Veda. But the point is, I don't want to see the Lord's servants mistreated. I don't want to see sincere souls denied justice in the name of Trinada Pi Sunichena. I don't want to see people, and I'm not saying this is happening, maybe it is, I'm just stating a general principle. That ISKCON cannot be a society in which leaders manipulate philosophy like Trinada Pi, be very humble, in order to treat people unfairly, mistreat them, deny them justice, in the name of everyone else should be humble. ISKCON cannot be that kind of society.
Well, I need to elaborate my question.
Go ahead, Veda.
So, I'm trying to understand, because we're speaking about justice more on a moral, ethical platform. And then there is the spiritual aspect of it, for example, that, things happen in this world, we are trained to accept things as though that we have done something in some lifetime to deserve what we get in this lifetime, and say, Krishna, thank you so much for not making it worse, that you have given me such a light punishment. Okay,
that applies, that you just sort of like that Vedic, that Vaishnava stoicism, just like whatever happens, that applies after, not before, we make our best effort on behalf of other people. If something happens to me, of course it's Krishna's mercy. But if everything that happens to everybody is just, their karma, then why would there be government? Why would kings enforce or leaders enforce justice? Why would a king or any other any political leader ever punish criminals, ever reward, people that deserve rewarded. There would be no justice. It's just complete anarchy. Don't do anything. Don't do anything. Let all hell break loose, and whatever happens, it's karma. It's just what you're basically advocating is anarchy. In my life, and that's not Vedic culture. Krishna himself comes to this world to make sure that, as far as karma, you find out what someone's karma is after, not before you have guaranteed justice. Not before you've done that. You do everything humanly possible to give justice to people, to ensure fairness, and after you've done that, despite all your efforts, whatever happens, then you can get philosophical about it.
Okay, I want to try and continue this part. So at what point, because, for example, if I dwell on the principle of justice, based on moral and ethical codes, I could sometimes get lost in it.
No, you dwell on something when it is deficient. For example, if let's say if I have a vitamin C deficiency, then I start to crave orange juice. So you dwell on something because it's missing and it's important. And once you restore the proper balance, then you don't have to obsess about it. It just becomes one of the normal pillars of civilization. It's just like if you have children, if one of your children, let's say God forbid, is sick, then that's the child you think about. Normally parents should think about all their children equally, but if one child is sick or something is missing in life, you have to think about it.
Okay, in continuation of that.
Oh wait, you wanted to? Hey, how you doing?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. I actually, that's sorry for this question, and your response was, so if we have a problem, and it should be handled, right? If we keep going back to it, and we try, it's not being handled, so I'm praying, please let me let this go, but I can't, and it's really, in my eyes, unfair, but I still want to let it go because I know.
Yes.
But I can't. It just keeps.
Okay, let's talk about that. Hey, Veda, come back. You got to hear this. Okay, here's the point. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who eats too little or eats too much can't practice spiritual life. One who sleeps too little or too much. And then he says this applies to everything. Now, emotionally, just as, like from what Veda said, and I know he's just playing the Agyani's advocate, that you could say, well, I'm not my body, and therefore I'm just not going to eat. I'm just not going to eat. I'm not going to sleep because I'm not my body. No. Because we do have a human reality. There's a human dimension. And you cannot advance spiritually if you just pretend you don't have a human reality. In fact, Krishna says that your duty in life, in the Varna system, comes from your human nature. That means your whole career in life, what you spend most of your time doing, comes from your human nature, not the fact that you're a pure soul. But because you are a pure soul, you offer it to Krishna. And that's how you transcend your human nature. But your whole career in life is based on your human nature, not the fact that you're a pure soul. And because you do have this body, you have to eat moderately, sleep, do everything. Krishna says, yukta hara biharasa. You should have moderate recreation. Some people think it's maya, to relax or laugh or just, take some time off. But Krishna says you have to do that to practice spiritual life. So, getting back to your question now. We have a human need for justice. And it's just like Prabhupada said, Raghunath Das Goswami was eating so little, but if you try to imitate Raghunath Das, you will fall down. In the same way, if you try to imitate the greatest Paramahamsas and pretend that you don't have a human need for justice, Doesn't work. And so just as we cannot imitate the Goswamis and eat maybe 2 or 3, old grains of rice a day, and just as you can't sleep, 45 minutes a day, emotionally, you cannot pretend that you don't have a material body, that you don't have a human side, that you're liberated absolutely. You can't pretend that when you're still in a human condition. And therefore, emotionally also, things have to be balanced. That's why people get married. People get married because it's an emotional, physical balance in which you practice spiritual life, but you have to acknowledge and satisfy your human nature. Emotional needs are no different than physical needs. You must satisfy them in moderation. So in moderation, you must satisfy your emotional need for justice. And it's frankly ludicrous. It's just absurd to claim that the Hare Krishna movement should guide the world, lead the world. Doctor, heal thyself. What I meant to say is, it's not absurd that ISKCON guide the world. That's not my point. It would be absurd for us to tell the world, let us guide you, if we cannot show the world a truly spiritual society where a leader is a leader because that person best understands that I'm not better than anyone else, and that I'm actually a servant of everyone else. And therefore, if I really how can I actually understand that I'm a servant of you or someone else and deny you justice? How can I understand that you are spirit soul and treat you unfairly? There's a word for that in English: hypocrisy. And probably more than any other institution in human history, religious institutions are famous for their hypocrisy. I don't know of any other human institution, in the last so many thousands of years, more famous for hypocrisy than religious institutions. And I'm not talking here about ISKCON. I'm talking about the general category of religious institutions. Perhaps the single most hypocritical institution in human history, as we see now in the news. People claiming to be acting for God and committing the most evil actions. So if a leader, why not put the burden on the other side? Rather than ask some simple devotee, some, Joe Prabhu or something, Joe the Prabhu, Joe the plumber, Joe the Prabhu. Why say to some simple devotee trying to serve Krishna that, why are you asking for justice? I think the question really has to go somewhere else. I think we need to ask leaders, why aren't you giving justice? Why aren't you treating people fairly if, hypothetically, there's a case where a leader is not treating people fairly? I'm not, naming names. I'm not trying to say this or that leader. I'm just saying, as a principle, as a general principle, that's the real question to ask. Because, to quote no less an authority than Spider-Man's uncle, with great power comes great responsibility. It's the people who have power. It's the people who have the big position. They're the ones who in the first place have to justify what they're doing. So they have to, and that includes myself. I'm a sannyasi guru, GBC emeritus. And so it's my responsibility not to just harass some young devotee or some, not just young, but some, soldier in ISKCON and harass them about, why do you want justice? Why do you want this or that? Why don't I ask myself, if I'm taking this big position, if I'm taking all this prestige, am I treating people fairly? Am I treating people respectfully? I think that, the higher your position in ISKCON, the more responsibility you have to ask yourself this question. Yes?
How do we ensure that there is justice in ISKCON?
I'd say do the math. It's, for example, let's say something happens somewhere in some community or whatever, and let's say it appears to you that someone was treated unfairly. Then you can investigate. You can encourage others. You can, this, and that's starting to happen now, actually. I don't want to just give myself the credit for the paper I wrote, but it's starting to happen now. So, because as I said, if you look at societies all around the world, in societies where you don't, where the people in general are not paying attention to what the leaders are doing and don't point out when they do the wrong thing, you always get widespread corruption and abuse. It's the only possible result, is corruption and abuse. Unless people pay attention and people speak out. According to Vaishnava etiquette, even if we think we've seen something unfair, it doesn't justify us to offend others. And we ourselves cannot be instruments of injustice. For example, if I see something that I think is unfair, I can't just, shout from the rooftops that, this person is unjust unless that person, who I think has acted unjustly, has received fair process. Frankly, the very fair process that so many leaders often deny others. So even if we see a leader denying other people fair process, which means things like the accused has a right to defend themselves. This is, by the way, ISKCON law. It's not always applied, but it's ISKCON law. The accused has a right to defend themselves, that the people making the accusation or judging the case must look at all the evidence, must be diligent to make sure they have all the evidence, and a person cannot be convicted or punished for something that was not clearly spelled out earlier. You can't make up the rule as you go along. In other words, the rule of law, not the rule of personal preferences. And so what I think ISKCON more and more in the present situation, frankly, devotees, good devotees, intelligent devotees, whenever they see what appears to them to be injustice, abuse, mistreatment, unfairness, they have to, with others or alone, investigate and be fair. We don't want vigilante mobs. We don't want vigilante mobs because we ourselves have to exemplify justice and fairness. And it's a simple fact. Unless that's done, it's starting to happen. Yes?
Wasn't there like a bureau of the government called, it's like a Federal Bureau of Investigation?
In ISKCON?
No, like just in the U.S. government. Something that's the arm of the government.
Well, that's not the justice system. That's just an investigative.
Yeah. I mean, like, if we leave it up to like just regular devotees to do all the investigation, that could create.
I agree with you. It would be really nice, but here's the history. ISKCON formed a justice ministry decades ago, and the leaders of the movement allowed it to basically collapse into total dysfunction. It was just a name. I mean, there was no justice ministry. There was no justice. And that's been for decades. And so in response to this obvious problem, a few years ago, they formed something called the ISKCON Dispute Resolution Office, IDRO, IDRO, which in Spanish means hydro, not to be confused with a hydroelectric thing. But so ISKCON Dispute Resolution Office. Unfortunately, and this is almost unbelievable, it's like you go to this ISKCON entity if you feel you were treated unfairly or unjustly, but they put in a rule that if an ISKCON manager, and almost in every case of alleged injustice, whether it's real or not, alleged injustice, in almost every case, the person who's thought to have acted unjustly is a manager because no one else has the power to act unjustly. And yet they put this rule in that if an ISKCON manager simply says that, okay, I'm accused of of acting unjustly, but my action was managerial. That's all he has to say, he or she, and that's over. No further investigation. The manager simply has to say that was a managerial decision and there can be no further investigation, according to ISKCON law. I mean, obviously that's absurd. So, if you look at societies around the world, what we find is there's something called NGO, non-governmental organizations. Now, one of the symptoms, one of the characteristics of first world countries where relatively or comparatively there's more justice, there's more transparency, is strong NGOs. And one of the main characteristics of third world countries, where there's a lot of corruption and almost no transparency, is weak NGOs. Weak NGOs. So now, in ISKCON, I mean, will the managers, probably called the ultimate managers of the movement, will they establish effective bodies and entities to ensure justice to the devotees? I hope they do. But there has to be justice. So therefore, and the idea, they use the term watchdog. What does association mean? Let's get back to the basics. What does it mean? We all know that in order to practice spiritual life, we need association. What does it mean? What constitutes association? Because let's say you can be in a crowded bus. You're not associating with those people because you don't know them. They don't know you. They're not really watching you. I mean, they may watch you, for example, if you do something suspicious, like pull something out of your shoe and start mixing chemicals. But so association only exists when you are with other people that know what you're doing and are evaluating what you're doing. And you know they know, and you care what they think. If those conditions aren't met, there's no association. So for example, let's say I'm a big leader, and I'm talking about myself. Let's say I'm a big leader and I become very proud and arrogant, and therefore I can be around 100 other devotees, but because I think none of them have a right to judge me, none of them have a right to criticize me, I'm not associating with them. They are not providing me association because I don't care what they think. But if I'm around a group of devotees and I care about what they think, either because they have the power to cause me trouble in some way or just because I am not shameless, and I have some sense of shame and I care what they think, then there's association. Now, if we have a group of leaders who basically think they're so high and mighty, if, this is hypothetical, who think they're so high and mighty that they don't care what other people think, then they're not having any association with anyone. There's no association there. And therefore, inevitably, their spiritual life will be have problems. And as we know, when people have power, they can get a little loopy. Whether it's sannyasi, guru, GVC, head bottle washer, whatever it is. Therefore, when you have strong NGOs, I'm not saying this is the only way, I'm just analyzing the way the world works outside our little bliss bubble. When you have strong NGOs, the leaders know I'm being watched. They know two things. Number one, I'm under the law, and if it's pointed out that I didn't follow the law, I'm going to have problems. And number two, intelligent people are watching me. In general, when human beings know that intelligent people are watching me, and if I do the wrong thing, I will be punished for it, they do the right thing. And that's what you find in governments around the world. If a human being thinks that no one's watching me, they may do the wrong thing. If they think people are watching me, but they have no power to do anything, I can do whatever I want, they may do the wrong thing. So both these things have to be the case. And the extent to which the leaders of this movement still have a human nature. The extent to which the leaders of this movement are not, in the highest, most exalted sense, Paramahamsas. The extent to which, like the rest of us, they're still somewhat conditioned. To that extent, the best guarantee they will do the right thing is if they know intelligent people are watching them, and they know that if they don't do the right thing, there will be consequences. Now, how you bring about those two conditions, is it an NGO? Is it, let's say, a GBC appointed body? I don't care as long as it works. But it has to work. And we cannot attract and retain. We cannot attract and retain intelligent devotees. Prabhupada made it very clear this movement will only succeed if we do attract and retain intelligent devotees. And we can only attract and retain intelligent devotees if they feel that in ISKCON they will be treated fairly. And they have a right to be treated fairly. And if they are treated unfairly, they can do something about it. Real world. You know, just like in the early days of ISKCON, I'm just about to finish, Veda. It's a Odyssey, so I'm actually making sure that you all fast. In the early days of the movement, we had a foolish idea that we were above the laws of nature. Rupa Goswami says at the beginning of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that if you surrender to Krishna, you are free of your karma. Free of your karma does not mean above the laws of nature. You can be free of your karma, but if you fall off a high place, you're going to fall exactly at the same speed as a karmi that falls from that high place, according to the laws of physics. So to think that ISKCON is beyond the laws of nature, you can eat, you know, very unhealthy prasadam and it won't matter because it's prasadam. No. I mean, we've had too many, you know, yeah, I mean, Prabhupada disciples are not famous as an extremely healthy group of people. So, or thinking, for example, people used to think that, oh, you know, a mother or father would think, I don't have to give a lot of attention to my child because I'm selling Prabhupada's books. And therefore Krishna will protect them. The result is catastrophic. So to think that because we're a spiritual society, we don't need justice is equally foolish. You know, we have to be good human, not only good devotees, we have to be good human beings. If people see, oh, we're good devotees, but not good human beings, there's a word for that, hypocrisy. Yes, you wanted to.
Maharaj, also within ISKCON, and sometimes I even wonder if this is not just envy of my own coming out, but there seems to be always a huge differentiation between Prabhupada disciples and everyone else. And so, now I'm not talking about being kicked or abused, but like when for Prabhupada worship, certain formalities that it's only Prabhupada's direct disciples who will bathe Srila Prabhupada, and no one else goes up and partakes in that. And sometimes, and
really,
and it may be my envy, but a lot of times I feel like that I love Srila Prabhupada too.
Okay, two things I'll say real quick because we don't have much time. Number one, there should be a certain etiquette. For example, in 1972 in New Vrindavan, when that famous Prabhupada visit, we had Janmashtami and Vyas Puja with Prabhupada, and at Prabhupada's own Vyas Puja ceremony, which was al fresco, you know, outdoor in the pavilion, Prabhupada asked the sannyasis to come up and speak. So there was a certain etiquette, there was a protocol. At the same time, so in terms of ceremonial events and everything, I mean, there is a certain etiquette which should be observed. At the same time, a Prabhupada disciple, being a senior person, should be the most enthusiastic, loving, well-wisher of everybody else. again, it's, I mean, as a Prabhupada, I'm a Prabhupada disciple, I guess, and nothing makes me happier than to see the younger devotees doing nicely, serving Prabhupada. That's my greatest happiness, because it's... And another thing is that Prabhupada is a Diksha Guru. You know, he's my Diksha Guru, he's not your Diksha Guru. However, that's not Prabhupada's main position. Prabhupada made it very clear that his main position was founder Acharya. That's what he put on his book covers. Prabhupada didn't put on the book covers, you know, Diksha Guru of ISKCON. He put founder Acharya. When Prabhupada introduced himself to important people, he introduced himself as the founder Acharya of ISKCON, not as the Diksha Guru of ISKCON. And as the founder Acharya, Prabhupada has an equal relationship with all of us. So in terms of Diksha Guru, yes, I am and you're not. So there. But that's not Prabhupada's main position. His main position, and he's the great Acharya. He's the great Acharya for our age. And so as the founder Acharya, we all have an equal relationship with him. Otherwise, it would lead to an absurd conclusion. If every generation after Prabhupada became farther away from Prabhupada, that means that as time goes on, ISKCON would become more and more separated from Prabhupada, which is absurd. Actually, in some way, I always make these points, these are my standard points, but in some ways, I think younger generations, like yourself and even younger generations, have an advantage over my generation. It's like, for example, let's say you're in the Rocky Mountains. When you're actually in the Rocky Mountains, especially like say on the road to Denver from Utah, because the road is so high, it looks kind of like hills. They kind of look, I mean, it's not the knockout, majestic sight maybe you were hoping for when you actually drive through the Rocky Mountains. But let's say in the Denver side anyway, because I'm familiar with it, let's say you come through the Rocky Mountains and you go maybe 10 miles east or 15 miles east, and you stop and look back, that's when it knocks you out. Because then you see the majesty of the Rocky Mountains. You can't see the forest for the trees. In some ways, I believe that people in your generation or younger generations, in some ways, can see Prabhupada more clearly than us. Because you have, in some ways, better perspective. In any case, if you do your duty, your dharma, for example, if you're the disciple of some this or that guru, there's an etiquette. You know, there's a standard Vaishnava etiquette. So whatever generation you're in, if you just do your duty and follow your etiquette, then you have the same access to Prabhupada as anyone else in the world. And in fact, if you take up Prabhupada's mission more seriously, then in fact you have a more intimate relationship with Prabhupada. It's not just an external pecking order. Whoever actually understands, for example, why Prabhupada put the word Western in his pranam mantra. Some people have criticized me because I juxtaposed the sacred with the vulgar. You know, Krishna, West. Like, just to, even linguistically, bring those two things together is inappropriate. What about Prabhupada? What about his pranam mantra? Yeah. So, if you really understand Prabhupada, not the ultra-conservative Prabhupada that some people have fabricated in their own image, but if you understand the real Prabhupada, who was conservative and also very liberal, who gave us all kinds of flexibility within inflexible principles, such as our philosophy, our practice, and our institutional framework. Prabhupada didn't want change, but within that fixed framework, he gave us all kinds of flexibility. He said we have to be Desha Kala Vibhagavit, which Bhishma, the Mahajan, states in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, and which Narada Muni states in the fourth canto. Desha Kala Vibhagavit. You have to understand differences of time and place. And Prabhupada said those who are puffed up with concocted notions think that, for example, whatever you do in India, you should do in America. He says that, puffed up with concocted notions. So if you really understand Prabhupada and you give your life to his mission, to defending his honor, you know, we chant every day, everyone says every day, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne. Did anyone notice? It didn't happen yet. I mean, does that matter to anyone? That it didn't happen yet? So it seems to me that if you really love Prabhupada, you want to defend his honor and make his words come true. By, especially those of us in the West, spreading his Western mission. So if you dedicate your life to that, you are the most intimate associate of Prabhupada. That's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Jaidang paramanguyam mad bhakteshu vidasyati. The one who stands up and preaches and doesn't just lead a selfish life, that doesn't just get totally absorbed. I mean, obviously, don't go to the other extreme either. I'm not talking about ignoring, denying your human needs. No, be a mature human being. Be an adult. Keep yourself physically healthy, emotionally healthy, intellectually and spiritually healthy. Be a healthy adult. But having done that, give your life to Prabhupada's mission. And if you do that, then you are the most dear associate of Krishna and of Prabhupada. And there's certain etiquette that we should preserve also.
I also have total respect for the etiquette. I think it totally should be observed. From what my experience has been is that it's the senior devotee should always be first, go first, and
especially the food.
It almost seems like, and I know we don't have time to go into this, but yeah, it's almost like there's some, every once in a while it feels like anyway.
Caste system? The point is, if we who are Prabhupada disciples, if we really have great affection for the younger devotees, if we, with all our heart, we want to help them, raise them, see them empowered, see them successful, I'm sure they will naturally have no problem with the fact that, you know, there's a certain etiquette. So therefore, I think the Prabhupada disciples, we should take the initiative to truly act as the affectionate well-wishers of the younger devotees. So we'll stop here. Thank you all very much for listening to this diatribe. All glories to Prabhupada.